3 tons of explosives roll into Burkina Faso's capital, hidden beneath fruit crates and grain sacks. The target: Africa's most defiant young leader. The plan: detonate the city, assassinate the president, collapse a revolution that has terrified Western powers for 2 years. But here's what they didn't expect. The system was waiting. This wasn't luck. This was the moment the Sahel proved it could no longer be controlled. What you're about to hear isn't just about one failed coup. It's about why Africa's second independence may have just become unstoppable, and why some people are desperate to reverse it before it's too late. Burkina Faso's customs officers at the Ouagadougou checkpoint pulled over a convoy of trucks entering the capital. Inside, beneath layers of commercial goods, they found something that would have changed West African history: over 3 tons of military-grade explosives, detonators, and assault weapons. The target wasn't a building. It was Captain Ibrahim Traoré himself, and the plan was to turn the capital into a war zone within hours. This wasn't just another failed plot. It was the closest Burkina Faso has come to losing its leader since the 2022 revolution. Ibrahim Traoré is not a typical head of state. At 36 years old, he's one of Africa's youngest leaders, thrust into power through a military coup after overthrowing Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba in September 2022. His rise was fueled by frustration with jihadist violence that had killed thousands, displaced millions, and made Burkina Faso one of the most unstable nations on the continent. Traoré promised results. He pivoted away from France, expelled French troops, and embraced Russia. He mobilized civilian militias. He spoke the language of sovereignty and Pan-Africanism in a region where foreign influence runs deep. But revolution breeds counter-revolution. And in a country where coups have become routine, power is never secure. The intercepted convoy wasn't a random shipment. Intelligence reports suggest the suspects had been moving the explosives for days, carefully coordinating entry points, using fake manifests, and exploiting gaps in border security. The operation involved insider knowledge, officials who understood checkpoint rotations, customs protocols, and how to blend military cargo into civilian trade routes. When interrogated, several suspects allegedly confessed to a multi-stage plan: detonate bombs at strategic locations across Ouagadougou, target government buildings, create panic, and in the chaos, assassinate Traoré. The goal wasn't just to kill a leader. It was to decapitate the entire chain of command and trigger a power vacuum that could be filled by forces loyal to the old guard, or worse, external actors waiting for Burkina Faso to collapse. Is this a domestic power struggle, or something coordinated from beyond the borders? Burkina Faso sits at the heart of the Sahel, a region where great power competition is playing out in real time. France, once the dominant security partner, has been systematically pushed out. Russia, through Wagner-linked operatives and military advisors, has moved in. Meanwhile, jihadist groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda and ISIS continue to control vast rural territories, exploiting the chaos for territorial gains. Traoré's pivot to Russia angered not just Paris, but also regional allies who fear Burkina Faso is becoming a testing ground for authoritarian governance backed by Moscow. At the same time, his aggressive military campaigns against jihadists have won popular support but stretched the army thin. He's fighting on multiple fronts: external insurgents, internal dissent, and now, assassination plots that suggest organized resistance to his rule. The timing of this plot is critical. Burkina Faso is weeks away from key political transitions, and Traoré has made it clear he intends to consolidate power. A successful attack wouldn't just kill a president. It would validate every critic who says the Sahel's military governments are experiments in instability. What happens next could redefine the region. If Traoré survives and tightens his grip, expect mass arrests, purges within the security forces, and even harsher rhetoric against foreign interference. If he falls, Burkina Faso could descend into civil conflict, with factions competing for control while jihadists expand unchecked. This is not just a Burkina Faso story. It's a referendum on military rule in the Sahel. Mali, Niger, and Guinea are all governed by young officers who took power by force, promised security, and aligned with Russia. If one falls, the domino effect could be catastrophic. 3 tons of explosives. A plan to kill a president. A capital city hours away from chaos. Burkina Faso's customs officers didn't just stop a convoy. They may have stopped a war. Security forces in Burkina Faso uncovered a plot that wasn't just about removing one man from power. It was about reversing a revolution. Hidden inside commercial trucks crossing into Ouagadougou were tons of military-grade explosives, weapons, and detailed plans to assassinate Captain Ibrahim Traoré. But this wasn't a spontaneous uprising. Intelligence reports suggest the operation had external fingerprints, coordinated, funded, and designed to collapse a government that has become one of the most defiant voices against Western influence in Africa. If the plan had succeeded, the Sahel's geopolitical realignment would have been stopped in its tracks. Ibrahim Traoré didn't just take power in 2022. He took a position. Within months of overthrowing the previous military government, he expelled French troops, ended decades-old defense agreements, and accused Paris of fueling instability rather than solving it. He turned to Russia for military support, invited Wagner-linked operatives, and began speaking openly about resource sovereignty, particularly gold and uranium, minerals that have quietly enriched foreign companies, while Burkina Faso remained one of the poorest nations on earth. This wasn't rhetoric. Traoré nationalized mining contracts, demanded renegotiations with multinational corporations, and aligned Burkina Faso with Mali and Niger in a new confederation explicitly designed to reduce dependence on former colonial powers. For the first time in decades, the Sahel was coordinating against external control rather than through it, and that made him a target. The December plot wasn't isolated. Over the past 2 years, Burkina Faso has faced repeated coup attempts, armed mutinies, and assassination threats, all occurring as Traoré deepened his alliance with Russia and distanced himself from France and ECOWAS, the regional bloc often seen as a vehicle for Western policy. The timing is impossible to ignore. Every major step towards sovereignty has been met with internal upheaval that conveniently aligns with foreign strategic interests. Consider the pattern across the region. In Niger, President Mohamed Bazoum was overthrown months after resisting pressure to expand French military presence. In Mali, Assimi Goïta survived multiple assassination attempts after pivoting to Moscow. In Guinea, Alpha Condé was removed shortly after signing mining deals with China. These aren't coincidences. They're part of a broader struggle over who controls the Sahel's future and its resources. Is this a new phase of Cold War competition, or the old playbook with different actors? Burkina Faso may be landlocked and underdeveloped, but it sits on significant gold reserves and uranium deposits critical to global energy security. For decades, these resources have been extracted under terms favorable to foreign companies, with profits flowing outward while local communities saw little benefit. Traoré has made resource nationalism central to his legitimacy, arguing that Burkina Faso's poverty is a political choice enforced by external powers, not an inevitability. His government has begun auditing foreign mining operations, demanding higher royalties, and threatening to revoke licenses for companies accused of tax evasion or environmental violations. France, which relies on African uranium for its nuclear energy grid, has watched this process with alarm. So have multinational mining conglomerates, whose profit margins depend on the status quo remaining intact. A successful coup wouldn't just remove Traoré. It would send a message to every African leader considering a similar path. Challenge the system, and you'll be removed. The failed plot revealed something critical. Whoever planned it had resources, intelligence, and logistical capacity far beyond a domestic opposition group. Moving tons of explosives across borders, coordinating entry into a heavily monitored capital, and timing the attack to coincide with political transitions requires backing from actors with significant operational reach. France has officially denied involvement, but its intelligence services have a long history in the region, including support for coups that served French interests. Meanwhile, regional allies aligned with ECOWAS and Western security frameworks have refused to recognize the legitimacy of Sahel military governments, creating a political environment where destabilization is tacitly acceptable. Russia, for its part, has used the chaos to expand influence, offering security assistance while positioning itself as the alternative to Western intervention. But Moscow's interest isn't altruism, it's access. Gold, uranium, and strategic positioning in a region where France is losing ground. The explosives were intercepted. The plot was foiled. But the campaign to destabilize Burkina Faso didn't end in December. It just failed this time. Traoré's survival is not a resolution. It's a delay in a much larger contest over sovereignty, resources, and who gets to define the future of the Sahel. If the military governments in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger succeed, it could mark the end of a century of external dominance in West Africa. If they fall, it will prove that defiance, no matter how popular, is not enough to overcome the structures built to contain it. When customs officers in Ouagadougou stopped a convoy of trucks in December 2024, they weren't following a routine inspection protocol. They were acting on intelligence. Inside those vehicles were tons of explosives, weapons, and a fully operational plan to assassinate Captain Ibrahim Traoré and trigger coordinated attacks across the capital. But here's what made this different from previous attempts. The plot didn't fail because of luck. It failed because Burkina Faso's security apparatus had fundamentally changed. For the first time since the 2022 revolution, the system worked. Burkina Faso's security forces have not historically been known for coordination. Coups, mutinies, and internal rivalries have defined the military for decades. Intelligence agencies operated in silos. Customs and border control were riddled with corruption. Trust between institutions was low, and information rarely flowed smoothly between military command, intelligence services, and civilian enforcement agencies. This fragmentation made Burkina Faso vulnerable, not just to external threats, but to internal subversion. When Traoré took power in 2022, he inherited a fractured system. Jihadist groups controlled large portions of the countryside. The capital had seen multiple coup attempts in under a year. Public confidence in the military was eroding. The question wasn't whether another plot would emerge. It was whether the system could detect and stop it before it was too late. The December interception suggested something had shifted. The operation to stop the assassination plot involved multiple layers of Burkina Faso's security infrastructure working in tandem. Intelligence services identified suspicious movement patterns and flagged communications indicating a large-scale operation. Military intelligence shared this information with customs authorities, who adjusted checkpoint protocols without broadcasting the alert publicly. When the convoy arrived, officers knew what to look for, and critically, they acted without hesitation. This wasn't a dramatic shootout or last-minute heroics. It was disciplined, methodical execution. The suspects were detained. The explosives were secured. The chain of command held. And perhaps most importantly, the customs commander immediately briefed the public with transparency, providing enough detail to confirm the threat without inciting panic or speculation. That last part matters more than it seems. In a country where rumors can spark riots and misinformation spreads faster than official statements, the decision to communicate clearly and quickly was a strategic choice. The customs commander didn't downplay the severity of the threat, but he also didn't sensationalize it. He confirmed the interception, outlined the nature of the plot, and reassured the public that the situation was under control. This approach had two effects. First, it prevented the kind of panic that destabilization operations rely on: fear, confusion, and the breakdown of trust in institutions. Second, it sent a message to anyone watching, whether inside Burkina Faso or beyond its borders. The security forces are no longer reactive. They are anticipating threats, sharing intelligence, and responding as a unified system. Is this a temporary improvement or evidence of a deeper institutional transformation? What the December plot revealed is that Traoré's government has prioritized something often overlooked in post-coup environments: institution building. Military purges after the 2022 takeover weren't just about removing disloyal officers. They were about installing commanders willing to cooperate across agencies. Intelligence reforms weren't just about gathering better information. They were about ensuring that information reached the people who could act on it. Customs, often one of the most corrupt and neglected branches of government in the Sahel, received new leadership, better training, and direct communication lines with military command. Ordinary citizens were encouraged to report suspicious activity, and for the first time in years, there's evidence they actually did. Tips from locals helped refine intelligence that led to the interception. This doesn't mean Burkina Faso's security apparatus is suddenly flawless. Jihadist violence continues. Rural areas remain insecure. Corruption hasn't disappeared. But the fact that a sophisticated, well-funded assassination plot was stopped before a single bomb detonated suggests the system is becoming harder to penetrate. Burkina Faso isn't the only Sahel nation facing internal and external destabilization. Mali, Niger, Chad, and Guinea are all navigating similar threats: coups, terrorism, foreign interference, and weak institutions. If Traore's government can demonstrate that disciplined institutional coordination can counter these threats, it offers a potential model for the region. Not a democratic one necessarily, but a functional one. The alternative is far worse. If security forces remain fragmented, intelligence remains siloed, and communication breaks down, the next plot won't be intercepted. And the consequences won't be limited to Burkina Faso. 3 tons of explosives. A coordinated assassination plot. A system that held under pressure. The December interception wasn't just about stopping one attack. It was proof that Burkina Faso's institutions are learning, adapting, and becoming more resilient. But resilience isn't permanence. Systems can be rebuilt, and they can be broken again. The real test isn't whether Burkina Faso stopped this plot. It's whether the coordination, transparency, and discipline displayed in December can be sustained when the next threat emerges. Because in the Sahel, there's always a next threat. Burkina Faso didn't just stop a coup attempt. It survived what may have been the last serious effort to reverse a revolution. Tons of explosives, detailed assassination plans, and coordinated destabilization tactics, all intercepted before reaching their target. But the failure of this plot means more than one government staying in power. It signals that the momentum across the Sahel towards sovereignty and self-determination may have reached a point where external forces can no longer stop it, no matter how much money, intelligence, or firepower they deploy. This wasn't just about saving Captain Ibrahim Traoré. It was about proving that Africa's second independence is no longer an experiment. It's becoming irreversible. Burkina Faso's 2022 revolution wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a wave. Within months, military governments in Mali, Guinea, and Niger all pivoted away from Western security frameworks, expelled foreign troops, and began asserting control over resources that had been quietly extracted for decades. These weren't traditional coups motivated by personal ambition or ethnic rivalry. They were explicitly anti-colonial in rhetoric and policy, framed as reclamation projects aimed at ending what leaders openly called neo-colonialism. Traoré became the face of this movement. Young, defiant, and uncompromising, he spoke in a language that resonated not just in Burkina Faso, but across the continent. He didn't ask for partnership with former colonial powers. He rejected the premise that Africa needed their permission to govern itself. He nationalized mining contracts, ended military agreements, and aligned with Russia not out of ideological alignment, but because Moscow offered weapons without conditions. And critically, he survived. Every coup attempt, every assassination plot, every effort to destabilize his government, each failure made the movement stronger. The December assassination attempt wasn't evidence of strength from those who planned it. It was evidence of desperation. When you resort to smuggling explosives into a capital city to kill a leader who has overwhelming popular support, you've already lost the political battle. The fact that the plot required secrecy, coordination, and external resources suggests it couldn't rely on internal legitimacy or mobilize domestic opposition openly. This is a critical shift. previous coups in the Sahel succeeded because they had institutional backing, military factions, regional support, or at minimum, elite consensus that the current leader needed to go. This plot had none of that. It was a clandestine operation designed to create chaos and hope someone else would fill the vacuum. That's not regime change. That's sabotage. And it failed not because of luck, but because the system has become more resilient, more unified, and more capable of defending itself. The interception wasn't just a security win. It was a symbolic validation of the revolutionary project itself. What makes this moment different from previous coup attempts in African history is the level of popular investment in the outcome. Traoré's survival isn't just a matter of military loyalty or intelligence competence. It's sustained by a public that genuinely believes the alternative, a return to Western-aligned governance, foreign military presence, and resource extraction on unfavorable terms, is unacceptable. Across Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey, protests in support of military governments have drawn tens of thousands. Russian flags fly alongside national ones, not because people love Moscow, but because they see Russia as the counterweight to a system they've come to distrust. This isn't manufactured propaganda. It's a generational shift in how sovereignty is understood. The question is no longer whether Africans want independence. They always have. The question is whether they now believe it's achievable, sustainable, and worth defending even at great cost. The survival of Traoré's government suggests the answer is yes. If the December plot had succeeded, it would have sent a clear message to every leader in the Sahel considering a similar path. Defiance has a ceiling. Challenge the system too much, and you'll be removed. But it didn't succeed, and that failure establishes a new baseline. It tells leaders in Mali, Niger, Chad, and beyond that resistance is viable. It tells external actors that coups, sanctions, and destabilization campaigns are no longer guaranteed to work. This is where the stakes become clear. If Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger consolidate power and prove that sovereignty without Western endorsement is sustainable, it fundamentally alters the geopolitical map of West Africa. It means the end of automatic deference to Paris, Washington, or Brussels. It means resource contracts will be renegotiated. It means military bases will close. It means the rules that have governed the region for 60 years are being rewritten in real time. 3 tons of explosives, a failed assassination, a revolution that refused to die. The December plot wasn't just another security incident in Burkina Faso's turbulent political history. It was a test of whether Africa's second independence can withstand the forces determined to stop it. The explosives were intercepted. The plotters were arrested. And the government didn't just survive, it grew more confident. That confidence is spreading. Across the Sahel, a generation is watching and learning that sovereignty isn't granted by former colonial powers. It's seized, defended, and sustained through unity, discipline, and the willingness to endure pressure. The question now isn't whether external forces will try again. They will. The question is whether they've already lost the political battle that matters most, the one for legitimacy, belief, and the conviction that another future is possible.